Good evening, everyone. For those of you who have spent decades watching the shifting tides of global power and the defense of our nation's interests, the news reaching us today from the Middle East is perhaps the most consequential in a generation. We are witnessing a seismic shift in Tehran, just days after a precision strike, coordinated by Israel and U.S. forces, struck the very heart of the Iranian capital. The Islamic Republic has made a move that many thought impossible. They have officially named Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old son of the slain leader, as the new supreme leader. This isn't just a change in management, it is a calculated defiance. By appointing the son of a leader killed in his own compound, the clerical council is signaling a transition toward a more rigid, hereditary dynasty. But more importantly for us here at home, this man is not a diplomat. He is a hardliner, deeply entrenched with the Revolutionary Guard, the very forces that have spent years targeting our interests and our allies. As the smoke clears over Tehran, we must ask the questions that the mainstream media often avoids. Are American troops in the region now in more danger than ever before? Does this move by Israel and the U.S. bring us closer to a resolution, or are we standing on the precipice of a conflict we cannot easily exit? Let's look at the facts behind this transition and what it means for the future of the West. To understand why this moment is so historic, we must look at the nature of the Iranian regime itself. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the position of supreme leader has been the ultimate authority, a role that oversees the military, the judiciary, and the state media. For decades, the system prided itself on not being a monarchy. They claimed to be a republic guided by clerics, specifically avoiding the hereditary succession that defined the Shah's era, which the U.S. once supported. But today, that facade has crumbled. By naming 56-year-old Mojtaba Khamenei as the third supreme leader, the Council of Clerics has effectively turned the Islamic Republic into a family dynasty. This wasn't a snap decision made in the chaos of last Saturday's strike in Tehran. No, this has been 20 years in the making. Mojtaba is not a stranger to the halls of power. While he is described as a mid-level cleric who studied in the seminaries of Qom, his real education took place in the shadows of the intelligence services. For the past 2 decades, his name has floated as the heir apparent, whispered in the corridors of power, but often dismissed because of the controversy it would cause among the traditionalist clerics. The timing of this appointment is critical. The previous leader was killed in his own compound, a massive security failure that embarrassed the regime and proved the reach of Israel and the U.S. In the aftermath of such a blow, the regime felt it couldn't risk an internal power struggle. They chose continuity. They chose the sun. However, this continuity comes with a very specific flavor of radicalism. Unlike some of the older clerics who remember the world before 1979, Mojtaba represents a generation that has grown up entirely within the revolutionary vacuum. He is a man who understands that his survival depends on the strength of the bayonet and the loyalty of the internal security forces. For those of us watching from home, this raises a red flag. We are no longer dealing with an aging Revolutionary Guard. We are dealing with a younger, perhaps more volatile leader who has everything to prove and a father's death to avenge. The transition from father to son in a regime this armed and this hostile is a development that should concern every veteran, every taxpayer, and every citizen who cares about our national security. The most chilling aspect of Mojtaba Khamenei's rise isn't just his bloodline, it's his brotherhood. For years, intelligence reports have highlighted his invisible hand within the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This isn't just a national army. It is a sprawling, multi-billion-dollar military and industrial complex that the U.S. has officially designated as a foreign terrorist organization. While his father held the title, it was often Mojtaba who whispered in the ears of the generals. He is known to be the favorite of the Revolutionary Guard, the very men who were reportedly pushing for him to be the front runner long before the smoke cleared from last Saturday's strike. This alliance creates a dangerous synergy. You have a leader who needs the military to maintain his inherited throne, and a military that needs a radical leader to justify their expansionist wars across the region. But let's look at how the world, specifically our strongest ally, is responding. As soon as it became clear that Mojtaba was the successor, the Israeli defense minister didn't mince words. He stepped before the cameras and issued a warning that should resonate in every capital city. Anyone named as the supreme leader is now fair game. This is a paradigm shift. In the past, there was a silent understanding that certain high-level political figures were off limits to prevent a total collapse of regional order. That era is over. By declaring the new leader a legitimate military target, Israel is signaling that they will not wait for the next plot to be hatched. They are prepared to strike the head of the snake as many times as necessary. For those of us who remember the Cold War, this level of brinkmanship is harrowing. We aren't just talking about a shadow war anymore. We are talking about an open, declared intent to decapitate the leadership of a sovereign nation. And because the U.S. remains the primary benefactor of Israeli security, we are inextricably linked to this high-stakes gamble. The question for every American over 60 who has seen the cost of Middle Eastern entanglements is simple. If Israel follows through on this threat, what is our exit strategy? If the new leader is targeted tomorrow, does that trigger the Iran-Israel war we've all been fearing? The fair game policy has turned the region into a powder keg with a very short fuse. As the political chess pieces move in Tehran and Tel Aviv, we cannot ignore the reality on the ground. This isn't just a war of words or a series of surgical strikes. It is a crisis that is tearing at the fabric of the Middle East. The heavy bombardment continues, and the civilian and political consequences are mounting by the hour. Inside Iran, the atmosphere is one of stifling fear and quiet resentment. While the regime holds elaborate ceremonies for its fallen leaders and celebrates the hereditary ascension of Mojtaba, the average Iranian is watching their economy crumble and their safety vanish. Many in the older generation of Iranians, those who remember a time when Tehran was the Paris of the Middle East, are heartbroken to see their country transformed into a fortress for a family dynasty, and the IRGC. But the fallout isn't contained within Iran's borders. The international community is watching with a mixture of horror and helplessness. We are seeing a massive disruption in diplomatic channels. In the past, intermediaries like Qatar or Oman could help de-escalate tensions. But how do you negotiate when one side has declared the other's head of state as fair game? The traditional rules of engagement have been tossed into the fire. The political instability within the Islamic Republic itself is also a ticking time bomb. Not every cleric is happy with this move. The Council of Clerics was reportedly divided, with some fearing that turning the Republic into a monarchy in disguise would lead to a total loss of legitimacy. This internal friction makes the regime even more dangerous. A cornered and divided leadership often lashes out externally to force domestic unity. For us in the U.S., this means the risk of miscalculation is at an all-time high. Every missile fired and every compound struck brings us closer to a point of no return. We have to ask, if the Iranian state begins to fracture under the weight of this new leadership and the constant pressure from Israel, who fills the vacuum? History has taught us that in the Middle East, what comes after a collapse is often more chaotic than what came before. The stakes are no longer just about who sits on the throne in Tehran. It's about whether the entire region can survive the transition. As we watch these events unfold from across the Atlantic, we must look through the lens of our own national security. Washington is currently buzzing with reaction to the naming of Mojtaba Khamenei. Our leaders are faced with a stark reality. The strategic patience of the past decade has led us to this moment, a moment where a hereditary IRGC-backed radical now sits on the throne in Tehran. The question every American taxpayer should be asking is, what is our level of involvement? We know that the strike on the Capitol was a coordinated effort between Israel and the U.S. This wasn't just an Israeli operation, it was a statement of unified Western resolve. But with that resolve comes a heavy price. Are we prepared for the blowback? Our troops stationed in Iraq, Syria, and across the Gulf are now looking at a horizon where the fair game policy could lead to direct retaliation. For those of us who remember the long, drawn-out conflicts of the past, the specter of a full-scale Iran-Israel war is not just a headline, it's a potential disaster for our sons, daughters, and grandchildren in uniform. Furthermore, the global economy is already twitching. If the Strait of Hormuz becomes a battleground under this new, volatile leadership, the pain at the pump we've felt in the past will look like a minor inconvenience. This is about more than just Middle Eastern politics. It is about the stability of the Western world's energy and security architecture. As the James Matthews report from Washington suggests, the administration is walking a tightrope. They want to support our ally Israel, but they are desperate to avoid a third world war. In this high-stakes game of chicken, the margin for error has officially vanished. As we close this chapter on the ascension of Mojtaba Khamenei, we are left with more questions than answers. The naming of a third supreme leader, one so deeply tied to the radical elements of the IRGC, marks the end of an era and the beginning of a much more dangerous one. We have seen the bold actions of Israel and the U.S. in taking out the previous leadership, but we must also acknowledge the reality of the cycle we are now in. When the Israeli defense minister calls the new leader fair game, he isn't just making a threat. He is defining the new rules of engagement. The shadow of an all-out Iran-Israel war has never loomed larger over the world stage. For those of us who have lived through the Cold War and the many conflicts that followed, we know that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We cannot afford to look away while the Middle East stands on a knife's edge. Whether we can still avoid World War III remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. The strength of the U.S. and our commitment to our allies will be tested like never before in the coming months. Before you go, I want to hear from you. This is a community of people who care about the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Comment "Pray for peace" below if you hope for de-escalation and the safety of our troops abroad. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that deep analysis and the truth matter more than the sensationalist headlines we see on the nightly news. We will continue to monitor the situation in Tehran and Tel Aviv closely. Thank you for your time, your wisdom, and your continued support of this channel. Stay vigilant, and God bless.